My name is Kris and I just turned 32. I should have been celebrating my promotion to senior account manager at the quarterly company dinner, but instead I found myself staring at an empty space where my wine glass should have been. The waiter had served everyone at our table except me. My boss, David Richardson, leaned in close and whispered with a satisfied smile, "You're the only one I trust to stay sober tonight." Something inside me finally cracked after years of being the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who always cleaned up everyone else's messes. I've spent my entire career being the person others could depend on. While my colleagues stumbled through Monday morning meetings nursing hangovers, I was the one presenting flawless reports. While they made embarrassing speeches at company events, I was the one apologizing to clients the next day. I thought this dependability would lead to respect and advancement, but sitting there watching everyone else clink glasses while I held a water tumbler, I realized I had become something else entirely. The designated adult in a room full of perpetual adolescents. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and conversation as my coworkers grew increasingly animated with each round of drinks. I watched them transform from the polished professionals I knew during business hours into versions of themselves I barely recognized. And there I sat, stone sober, taking mental notes of every inappropriate comment and questionable decision, knowing that tomorrow they would expect me to remember what they chose to forget. If you've ever felt like you're carrying the weight of other people's choices while they get to live consequence-free, then you'll understand what happened next. Because that night, for the first time in my professional life, I decided to stop being everyone's safety net. I grew up in a middle-class household in suburban Denver with parents who valued stability above all else. My father worked as an accountant for 30 years at the same firm, never missing a day, never taking risks. My mother managed our household with military precision, ensuring every meal was on time, every bill was paid early, and every family obligation was met without question. They raised me and my younger brother Marcus with clear expectations. Responsibility first, fun second, and never let anyone down. Marcus was the charming one, the risk-taker who could talk his way out of any situation with a smile and a joke. He was 3 years younger but always seemed to have more friends, more opportunities, and somehow more freedom. While I spent my teenage years working part-time jobs and maintaining perfect grades, Marcus coasted through high school on natural charisma and the safety net I unknowingly provided. Our family dynamic was established early. I was the dependable daughter who would handle the serious matters, while Marcus was the creative spirit who needed protection from the harsh realities of life. When he forgot his homework, I would stay up helping him complete it. When he spent his allowance too quickly, I would lend him money. When he got in trouble at school, I would help craft explanations for our parents. The pattern became so normalized that by the time I graduated high school as valedictorian, I had already trained myself to anticipate and solve other people's problems before they even realized they had them. I thought this was leadership. I thought this was strength. I didn't realize I was building a prison of other people's expectations. The corporate world welcomed me with open arms because they recognized immediately what my family had always known. I was someone who could be counted on to handle whatever others couldn't or wouldn't. During my first job at a marketing firm, I quickly became the person who stayed late to fix colleagues' mistakes, who covered presentations when others called in sick, who remembered important client details that everyone else forgot. At first, this felt like recognition. My supervisors praised my reliability and dedication. Colleagues thanked me for my help and support. I received steady promotions and salary increases, which I interpreted as validation that my approach was working. But with each new role, the expectations grew heavier, and the appreciation became more assumed than expressed. The pattern escalated when I moved to Richardson and Associates 5 years ago. David Richardson, the founding partner, immediately identified me as his go-to person for any crisis or complex situation. When major clients were upset, I was the one who smooth-talked them back into compliance. When important deadlines were missed by other team members, I was the one who worked weekends to deliver on time. When company events needed planning, I was the one who handled every detail, while others simply showed up to enjoy the results. Slowly, my role evolved from senior account manager to unofficial chief problem solver, emotional labor coordinator, and corporate parent. I managed not just my own responsibilities, but the consequences of everyone else's choices. My calendar filled with meetings to address issues I hadn't created, and my evenings disappeared into fixing work that shouldn't have been broken in the first place. The most dangerous part was how normal it all felt. Each individual request seemed reasonable. Sarah, could you just? Sarah, would you mind? Sarah, you're so much better at this than anyone else. I had become so accustomed to being needed that I confused being indispensable with being valued. The first major warning sign came during our annual client retreat in Aspen 6 months ago. While I spent the weekend managing logistics, troubleshooting technical difficulties, and ensuring every client need was met, my colleagues enjoyed skiing, spa treatments, and networking dinners. On Sunday night, David publicly thanked me for making everything run smoothly as always, but I noticed that everyone else received bonuses for exceptional client relationship building during the retreat. I had done the work, they had received the credit and the compensation. 3 months later, during our biggest campaign launch of the year, my colleague Jennifer completely botched a presentation to our most important client. She had ignored my advice about the client's preferences, dismissed my research findings, and showed up unprepared to a meeting that represented 6 months of work. When the client threatened to terminate their contract, David immediately called me into his office. Sarah, I need you to fix this, he said, as if Jennifer's failure was somehow my responsibility. I spent the next 2 weeks rebuilding the relationship, redesigning the campaign, and presenting a recovery plan that ultimately saved the account. Jennifer received a written warning that was removed from her file after 3 months. I received a verbal thank you, and the expectation that this was simply part of my job. The financial cost of being everyone's safety net became impossible to ignore. I had turned down 3 job offers from competitors because David convinced me I was too valuable to lose. Yet my salary had remained essentially stagnant for 2 years. Meanwhile, colleagues who contributed less but socialized more received promotions and raises. I calculated that my unpaid overtime, weekend work, and crisis management had cost me approximately $40,000 in lost wages and opportunities over the past 3 years. My personal life became collateral damage in this professional martyrdom. I had ended 2 promising relationships because I was always canceling dates to handle work emergencies. My friendships outside the office withered because I was perpetually exhausted and had nothing to talk about except other people's problems. I had stopped pursuing hobbies, stopped traveling, stopped investing in my own growth, because all my energy went toward managing everyone else's chaos. The breaking point began building during the week before the quarterly dinner. On Monday, I discovered that 3 team members had been covering up a major error in our quarterly reports by simply not reporting negative metrics. On Tuesday, I learned that our department had been consistently overpromising deliverables to clients without consulting me about feasibility. On Wednesday, I realized that several colleagues had been taking credit for my strategic recommendations in their individual performance reviews. By Thursday, I felt like I was drowning in other people's incompetence while they floated comfortably on the life raft I had built for them. The quarterly dinner was supposed to be a celebration of our team's success, but as I sat at that table watching the waiter skip over me, I saw the gesture for what it really was. I wasn't a trusted colleague, I was the designated driver for a group of people who never intended to take responsibility for their own choices. David's comment about trusting me to stay sober wasn't a compliment. It was an assignment. While everyone else got to relax, enjoy themselves, and bond over shared experiences, I was expected to remain alert, responsible, and ready to manage whatever chaos might emerge from their indulgence. I was not a participant in the celebration. I was the insurance policy. Looking around the table, I watched my colleagues laugh and share stories, building relationships and memories that would serve them professionally and personally. Meanwhile, I sat stone sober, mentally cataloging who was drinking too much, who was sharing confidential information too freely, and who would need damage control the next morning. I was present but not included, essential but not valued. Actually, David, I said, my voice cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant, I think I'll have the wine after all. I signaled the waiter, who looked confused but brought me a glass of the same Cabernet everyone else was enjoying. David's face shifted from surprise to disapproval. Sarah, you know how important it is that someone stays clear-headed tonight, he said. Why is it important? I asked. Because you can't trust your team to behave professionally without a babysitter? The table went quiet. I could feel everyone's attention shifting to our conversation, but instead of feeling embarrassed, I felt liberated. I'm 32 years old, David. I have an MBA, 5 years of excellent performance reviews, and I just secured our 2 biggest accounts this quarter. I think I can handle a glass of wine with dinner. The next morning, I walked into David's office with a prepared statement and a resignation letter. "I need to discuss my role and responsibilities," I began, placing both documents on his desk. "You can read my resignation now, or we can have a conversation about restructuring my position to reflect appropriate boundaries and compensation." David was stunned. In 5 years, I had never challenged him, never refused a request, never advocated for myself. "Sarah, I don't understand. You're our most valuable team member. Everything you do is appreciated." I pulled out a folder containing documentation of my unpaid overtime, my colleagues' errors that I had corrected, and a market analysis of my current compensation versus industry standards. "Appreciation doesn't pay my mortgage or fund my retirement," I said. "I've been subsidizing this company's success with my time, energy, and career advancement for 3 years. Either we restructure this arrangement, or I take my skills somewhere that will compensate them appropriately." Over the next 2 weeks, I implemented a systematic boundary-setting campaign. I stopped answering work emails after 6 p.m. and on weekends. I declined requests to fix other people's mistakes unless it was explicitly part of my job description. I began delegating tasks back to the people who were actually responsible for them. When colleagues complained that I was not being a team player, I calmly explained that team players don't carry the entire team on their backs. The resistance was immediate and intense. Jennifer actually cried when I refused to proofread her client presentation, claiming I was abandoning her. Marcus, who had learned of my workplace changes through family gossip, called to lecture me about burning bridges and being difficult. Even my parents expressed concern that I was risking my career by being less accommodating. Within 6 weeks, something remarkable happened. People adapted. Jennifer learned to proofread her own presentations and actually improved her attention to detail. My other colleagues began taking ownership of their responsibilities instead of assuming I would handle everything. David, faced with the choice between losing me and restructuring my role, agreed to a 30% salary increase, a new title of Director of Strategic Operations, and a clear job description that eliminated the unofficial expectation that I manage everyone else's professional lives. The most significant change was in how my colleagues related to me. Instead of treating me like a maternal figure who would always clean up their messes, they began approaching me as a peer and expert. Our conversations shifted from them asking me to solve their problems to them seeking my advice on how to solve problems themselves. I was no longer the office parent. I was the strategic consultant I had always been qualified to be. My personal life began to flourish as I reclaimed my evenings and weekends. I started dating again, rekindled friendships that had been neglected, and enrolled in a photography class I had been postponing for 3 years. The energy I had been spending on other people's crises became available for my own growth and happiness. My relationship with my family also evolved. When Marcus called asking me to co-sign a loan for his latest business venture, I said no for the first time in our adult relationship. When my parents expressed disappointment that I wouldn't be handling the logistics for our family reunion, I helped them hire a professional event planner instead. These boundaries initially caused tension, but ultimately led to more authentic and balanced relationships. 6 months later, I can see clearly what I couldn't see before. Being needed is not the same as being valued, and being reliable is not the same as being respected. I had confused my worth with my willingness to sacrifice myself for others' convenience. The moment I stopped making myself available for exploitation, I discovered my actual value in the workplace and in my relationships. The corporate dinner that changed everything feels like a lifetime ago, but the lesson remains crystal clear. You teach people how to treat you through what you're willing to accept. For years, I had taught everyone around me that my time, energy, and expertise were unlimited resources they could consume without reciprocation or recognition. Today, I am still reliable, still skilled, still dedicated to excellence. But I am also boundaried, compensated fairly, and treated as the professional I am rather than the martyr I had become. The wine I ordered that night wasn't just a drink. It was a declaration of my right to participate fully in my own life. If you recognize yourself in this story, if you're tired of being everyone's emergency contact while never having anyone to call in your own emergencies, then it's time to pour yourself that glass of wine. It's time to stop being the designated driver for other people's careers and start navigating your own path with intention and self-respect. You are not responsible for managing other people's consequences. You are not required to sacrifice your growth for their comfort. You are worthy of celebration, recognition, and the same grace you extend so freely to others. The moment you believe this and act accordingly is the moment your real life begins.